for short. You'll hear us refer to it as that all this morning. I'm Tracy Herlitsky. I'm the director of the Wisconsin Safe and Healthy Schools Center, and we're a statewide organization in Wisconsin that partners with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction to provide training and technical assistance around safe and healthy school topics, and that includes School SBRIT. On this project, we work closely with Scott Caldwell from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, who is co-presenting here today, and I welcome him to unmute and introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. We're just thrilled to share about a decade of work on a statewide implementation project for School SBRIT. Thanks, Tracy.
So brief, Scott. So just a little context for this project. In 2014, the Wisconsin Safe and Healthy School Center, I'll refer to us as the WISH Center, we started providing training on School SBRIT in schools throughout Wisconsin. Prior to this, Scott really developed the model and the training, and we expanded the rollout of the training to the whole state. In 2017, Wisconsin Act 31 passed, and it allocated $200,000 per year of funding to support training and implementation. So I have 5 WISH team members who provide training and implementation support. $200,000 funds about 30 schools per year. This is just part-time. We do a lot of other training. This is one of the projects that each person has about 36 days of time to support this project. Scott provides the technical assistance support to our team and serves as the evaluator in the project through his work at the Department of Health Services. Go ahead, Scott. So today we will cover the what, why, and how to implement School SBRIT. We're going to spend about 20 minutes on the what is School SBRIT, going through specific elements of SBRIT practice, such as components, processes, and skills. We're going to share why SBRIT implementation is important, and we're going to engage with you and invite you to do the same. And then we're going to share some of our lessons learned and how to best approach SBRIT implementation. This is everything we learned the hard way over the last 10 years that we wish we had when we got started. So quick overview, a visual depiction, Scott, on the next slide of our SBRIT model. There's several elements of delivering SBRIT. There are the processes. These are the processes for motivational interviewing, and we'll go through how we've developed a protocol for engaging in each of these processes. There's the screening and brief intervention components of the intervention. There are core skills, and these lean heavily on motivational interviewing, as some of you might know. And then there are tools that we use that really give schools everything they need to implement School SBRIT. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to briefly touch on these elements. Feel free to take some notes. Then we're going to pause at the end of the 20 minutes and allow some time for question and answer and discussion. So School SBRIT begins where all evidence-based effective practices begin, with that engaging process. So in this engaging process, we really work to establish a good working relationship with the student. It's really a student-centered intervention, and it's a little bit of a change in practice for the practitioners we work with who do a lot of directing and advising. It sort of shifts the relationship and allows the student to guide the practice. So we quickly and really powerfully establish a good working relationship with the student. And then we take a first few minutes of each session to come back to engaging to make sure that core component is in place. And really this is about more listening than asking questions, which is also a big change in practice for a lot of educators that we work with. This is all based on motivational interviewing, so we call the listening, reflective listening statements. And in training, we spend a lot of time practicing and experiencing how to make those good reflective listening statements and move from simple to those complex reflections. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So once we've engaged the student and introduced SBRIT, the next step is the screening process. This is what the screening tool looks like that we use here in Wisconsin. It's a well-established, psychometrically validated global appraisal of individual need or gain short screen. It was designed for delivery with adolescents in non-clinical settings like middle schools and high schools. And with practice that we provide in the training, it takes about 5 minutes for a practitioner to administer, score, and interpret the gain short screen result. I think that's one of the main reasons why we decided to go with it, because it was really easy to use, highly accessible, and very brief. It measures behavioral health risks across 4 domains. So that's internalizing symptoms, externalizing symptoms, AODA, and crime and violence. Keep in mind, this is not an assessment, it's not diagnostic, but it's a really powerful screening tool that gives school staff an excellent understanding of the level of risk across these behavioral health domains. I've heard several school counselors talk about how it gives them more information in that 5 minutes than they could get from their previous practice of spending hours engaging with a student, that it's just really, really efficient, and it gets to that root cause of the behavior a lot faster than they would through other means. And most importantly, the screening results set up the brief intervention component that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So the screening results inform the process of focusing. And this is where it really becomes a guiding conversation between the student and the practitioner. Focusing is really about collaboratively identifying a single change target with the student. Because students come to staff with complex and multiple areas of risk, this is really where the focusing process narrows it down to a specific symptom, a substance, or a behavior that has been identified as moderate or high risk on that gain short screener. Staff also consider the reason for the referral. For example, a lot of our schools are using this for AODA code violations. So the change target will likely be on the substance use behavior. So really is, I think, what makes this really effective, because it's focusing in on one target behavior that that student can collaboratively agree to and engage in and evoke and create their own change plan for. I'm going to pause and turn it over to Scott to get us into the evoking process.
And Tracy, I have a couple of comments if
Yeah.
I could, as you're launching us in this incredible model called SBRIT. And one is that the symposium here is on adolescent substance use. But what we have found is that substance use often co-occurs with mental health, those internalizing symptoms, also conduct and behavior. And so just talk, if you could, just very briefly, how student services really value this brief screening of all 4 domains that really kind of complete a behavioral health risk profile.
Yeah, well, it just gets to the root of the problem. You know, so the substance use that a violation a student might have might just be sort of the symptom of a bigger mental health issue that they're having some coping strategies with substance use related behaviors. So it really does get to that root cause. And, you know, it's really that guiding style of working with the student. It's so student centered. It's not telling them what's wrong with them. It's really engaging in a process where that student can see some data with that gains short screen and identify an area that they want to change. So it's really like the partnership partnership spirit of motivational interviewing, and it's a way different approach than some of the other punitive measures that schools are using that aren't really working because they're not getting at any of the substance use and or mental health behaviors.
Yeah, and it's really both things. It's like this relational foundation that you're so clearly describing, but then there's kind of this technical aspect of some screening, taking a look at 4 different domains of behavioral health for setting up the intervention. And that brings us around to the next process in this stair step, how these stair steps of processes build upon one another. And the evoking process is where the SBRIT practitioner is going to explore and is going to cultivate the student's motivation for change. And this evoking process of exploring motivation is really the heart of brief intervention. And as Tracy mentioned, we're borrowing heavily from the motivational interviewing folks, Bill Miller, Steve Rolnick. You can see the references down below. And what we know from motivational interviewing as part of this brief intervention is that ambivalence is really important to address. Now, ambivalence is a hallmark of adolescent development. And so to have ambivalence normalized on the table and non-judgmentally explored, both sides, the reasons for change, the reasons against change, makes brief intervention a very adolescent-friendly intervention approach. Part of the approach is recognizing, responding, cultivating student change talk. What is change talk? Change talk is basically anything that the student says that is in the direction of change. Regarding that change target that Tracy talked about collaboratively being developed and identified in the focusing process. Now, all the while, in education, educators like to educate. And adults and adult professionals like to provide advice and information and even a little bit of telling students what to do, how to change, why they should change. And we resist all those impulses in this model. We call it resisting the fixing reflex, that impulse to want to fix the student, fix the mental health, fix the risky substance use, fix the conduct issue. And that really requires some restraint on the part of SBRIT practitioners. And also what requires a little bit of restraint is not wandering, not taking tangents, not getting off topics. And so one of the things about this process model of SBRIT is that these processes build from one to the next. So even though we're in the evoking process, exploring motivation, we are still maintaining a focus on that one change target, and we're still maintaining that engagement, that good working alliance or good working relationship. And also, we're borrowing from the motivational interviewing folks on the core skills, summarized by the acronym OARS. So in training, we reintroduce practitioners to open questions. And we say reintroduce because practitioners know that open questions are better than closed questions, oftentimes. And open questions are nuanced depending on what process you're in. So the open question that the practitioner may ask in engaging is going to be completely different than the open questions that are asked in evoking to draw out and explore a student's motivation. We're looking for strengths. We're affirming those strengths real specifically. This is different than cheerleading or what Carol Dweck in her research in education calls non-specific praising. So we try to move away from non-specific praising to affirming specific detailed student strengths. And that's a real important skill in supporting change and in change conversations. Reflective listening. Tracy mentioned the importance of that for engaging. It's important in focusing. It's important in all of these processes of SBRIT and brief intervention. Reflective listening, really requiring the practitioner to listen and to attend to what is the student's experience, what's the student's perspective, what is the student saying, holding up the mirror, reflecting back. And then finally, summarizing, the S of OR skills, where before we move on to the next process, we're going to offer a summary of what we're hearing from the students. So for example, in the evoking process, we're listening for the student's motivation. And before we go to the next process, which is planning, we're going to summarize the students' ideas about change, their reasons for change, their possible motivations for change before moving on. So you get a sense of the richness of this intervention model, where we have processes, we have core skills, we have these two big components of SBRIT, the screening and the brief intervention. And just to kind of zoom out for a moment here, in the better part of the decade that Tracy and I have been involved in this project, we have listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of student services staff in training and coaching and consultation in this model. And this right here, this intervention as usual, is kind of an aggregate picture of some of the elements of practice that we very commonly hear practitioners come into training with. These are some of the habits, these are some of the proclivities, these are some of the orientations that we see practitioners have. And they're very, very different than brief intervention. But let me just first kind of very quickly touch on each one of these elements of what we're calling intervention as usual. And it starts with understanding the problem. And there's lots of questions that get asked to understand the problem. When does the problem happen? Where does the problem, with whom does the problem happen? Maybe we can get to some root causes of the problem. But it ends up being a lot of closed questions a lot of time to understand the problem. And what is the purpose? What is in the intention of the practitioner to understand the problem? Well, it is to solve the problem. It is to educate, provide advice, provide information. And then we're going to get to the plan. What are you going to do? Now that we understand the problem and I've offered some ways that we can solve the problem, now what? A little bit of planning. And all of this tends to be a bit more talking on the part of the adult professional than listening. All right, now let's contrast every one of these elements of intervention as usual with brief intervention in this model that we're presenting to you. Whereas understanding the problem may be useful in this model, we are seeking to understand the student's motivation for change. Their reasons, their ability, their desire, their perceived importance, as example. Instead of gathering facts, we're going to ask selective questions to draw out that motivation. Evocative open questions is what we call it. And we're going to hear change talk. If we ask for change talk, if we ask for motivation, we're likely to hear it. And then that's what we're going to cultivate. That's what we're going to reinforce, the students' own ideas about change, their own reasons, their own motivations. And we're going to hold off on the plan. If we're not hearing a lot of change talk, we're not going to jump to a plan before we've really explored thoroughly motivation. Maybe we've kind of touched on ambivalence. Maybe we've looked at ambivalence and we're seeking to resolve ambivalence. So all that means possibly holding off on a plan until the student is signaling that they're ready for a plan. And then finally, lots more listening and reflection in the direction of change, cultivating that change talk, then talking, and certainly advice giving. So you can see that there's real difference between when practitioners come into training and when they leave training. They have a real different conception of intervention for behavioral health. And just to underscore the point here, none of the practitioners that we see are alcohol and drug counselors. None of the practitioners we work with are specialist behavioral health treatment providers. This is an intervention. This is a model for non-specialists that happens to be incredibly effective for addressing effectively behavioral health issues that students present in the school setting. And a part of that is a package of tools that are used. So when Tracy introduced the model, that visual depiction, we had processes, components, skills, and this is the tools. The tools fit with the brief intervention. So we start the brief intervention typically with an importance ruler to explore the student's perceived importance for making this change, 0 to 10. And no matter where the student puts themselves, there's no judgment. We're going to ask a question that's going to draw out change talk. So the student, let's say, puts themselves at a 2 for importance on making this change with like alcohol use, for example, drinking. And the practitioner will follow up, well, why a 2 on importance and not a 0 on importance? And that question tends to draw out change talk. When importance is low, like a 2 or a 3, then the practitioner is guided in the protocol to explore ambivalence. Because if change is a low priority, chances are there may be some ambivalence lurking around the corner. And so this pros and cons worksheet is about exploring both sides of ambivalence. The pros of continuing the drinking without change, and the cons or the disadvantages or the drawbacks of continuing the drinking or whatever the change target is without change. It's a very useful conversation, very non-judgmental. We draw up both sides, and then we ask the student, well, given the cons, given the pros, given the cons, where does this leave you? Oftentimes, it begins to tip the balance towards change. And then the next step is to ask those evocative questions. And what you see here is a tool from the toolkit that just lays out the different types of change talk that the motivational interviewing researchers have identified. And what are questions that kind of proactively draw out desire? What are the questions that proactively draw out the student's ability, their perceived capacity for making the change? What are their reasons for making the change? What needs to happen? What's the importance here? What has to change from the student's point of view? What might be the student's commitment for change? Activation, their readiness, their willingness, or maybe even steps that have been taken in the recent past. So the practitioner does not have to make any of these up. We have these embedded in the protocol as part of these evocative open questions. And if we're hearing a lot of change talk, if we're hearing some motivation for change, these are signals from the student to the practitioner that we might be ready for planning. So the practitioner will summarize this work in evoking and then go to planning if the student is ready. And the key tool here is a change plan. And this should look very familiar to all of you who provide direct services, where a change plan generically starts with a goal. What is the focus of change? What is a good specific measurable goal that we want to work towards? That goal is usually linked back to the screening. So if there was a couple of symptoms linked together that were high risk, the goal might be, okay, we want to take these 2 symptoms that were high risk, and the goal is to reduce these, eliminate risk if possible, and couple that with maybe some sort of behavior, some supportive behavior change that would support that symptom reduction. So the change plan goal, very specific, measurable, time limited, so a good SMART goal. And then the practitioner engages this collaborative conversation, just like focusing, collaborative agenda setting. Here, it's a collaborative strategy, ideas for change. How is that change going to occur? According to the student. And the practitioner documents the brainstorm. And we love the last question on the change plan, which is, what would your best friend say about you making this change? Because it puts it right back in that adolescent developmental context of the peer group being very, very important, friends being very, very important. So we've got, again, some more kind of adolescent developmental relevance here in this intervention. And the brief intervention concludes, this planning process concludes with back to the ruler, but this one is for confidence. So 0 to 10, How confident are you that you could make this change, that you could achieve this goal? And what we tend to find anecdotally is that the teenage students tend to rate themselves pretty high on this. So what might have been a little low to start with importance, now here we are with ability, with confidence, which tends to be pretty high. So just a couple more slides, and then we're going to open it up to what you all identify as like a real key element of this practice model that's really getting your attention. And all of this, processes, skills, the core components of SBRIT with screening, brief intervention, and the tools are all come together in this one-page protocol that guides practitioners to deliver the service. The brief intervention itself comprises about what our statewide data shows is about, on average, it's about 3 meetings plus or minus 1. So between 3 and 4 meetings that typically last about 20 to 30 minutes. So brief is fairly brief. It's about a 70 to 90-minute intervention over the course of a month. But it nonetheless does take some time and some focus to get into place. And so that's the what of the Wisconsin school SBRIT model. And Tracy, let's open it up here. We're curious. You can go to chat. You can briefly unmute. Like, what is getting your all's attention? One thing in this practice model.
I like that the screening is brief because when working with adolescents, it's like their attention span can be short. So just going through and like knocking down like the most important like bullet points, just to get an idea of like where they are and their, I guess, like area of like motivation to change.
I agree with that. And I also like the fact that it's goal focused. So what is important to that young person and what it is that they want to see in their life.
Yeah, and the two are linked. So yes, the screening is very brief, 20 items. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes. And it sets up that goal setting based on that collaborative focusing conversation. What else is getting your all's attention here?
I'll go ahead and go. I think for me, the ability to start having these screenings available for adolescents, that we can identify those who may need a referral to treatment a lot sooner, is one of the main things about SBRITs. I wish all school systems would implement this because I think it's so needed. The adolescent and young adult substance use coordinator. We've partnered with the University of Baltimore to start doing the youth SBRITs in pediatrician practices, and it's yielding positive results. So one thing I would really love to do in my role is to try to bring this to school systems. So some questions that I have is where do I start? You know, when it comes to school systems, getting the buy-in, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself and you're going to talk about that later, because I don't even know where to start with school systems and confidentiality and all that stuff.
Well, it's such a nice segue. And Simon Sinek, the business world guru, says start with the why. So we're going to get there, but there's a hand up.
Sorry. Hi. So I'll be honest, I don't work in a school system, but I'm working on an outpatient level at a local CSB. And I guess I've used MI with adults and things like that. And I want to use this. I'm starting to see adolescents with co-occurring trauma history. So as far as trauma screeners, right? Chicken or the egg? Do we identify goals to address the trauma or not? One kid in particular I'm about to see, I mean, it's just constantly overlaps. So I guess I'm curious on with trauma, what things to look out for. I mean, I have plenty of trauma screeners that I can use on my own, but I guess just with SBRIT, like, I don't know. And again, I understand I'm an outlier here, not working within the school systems, but I'm here for it.
Well, it's a very sophisticated approach to do a behavioral health screen that absolutely includes a trauma questionnaire. And there are really good standardized trauma assessment and screening instruments out there, which I'm sure you're incorporating. One of the ways that I think we can find to blend is, even though SBRIT is really focused on a specific change target, there's real wiggle room for, let's actually go back to the tool of the change plan, because the goal might be to reduce drinking, but the strategies for how to achieve that goal could be based on, like, how are you going to manage and cope with those trauma triggers that the screen showed are really present in your life. So you can see how the goal of change could be interfered with trauma responses that could be part of the strategies of how to support that change. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I know today's topic, definitely SUD focused, but I appreciate that I find like CBT rooted stuff is, structured as it should be. That's how you get the best outcomes. But trauma isn't always super structured. So this is nice to hear, like, outside of which I plan to use, that like I like your ideas, I guess is what I'm saying. Thank you for that feedback.
Scott, one question that we've encountered in the training room is sort of related to this. It's from the school practitioner point of view. Like, well, first of all, this intervention is a win-win to me. Like, so the school can do their part in trying to address the mental health challenge in the school. And if this intervention doesn't work, they make the referral to whether it's an internal referral or an outside referral. It's a warm handoff to a person, and they have a little bit more information to share with that provider if their system allows for that. So we have had questions from practitioners, like, I know the student is seeing somebody, an outside mental health provider, for something else. Should I do this? And and what we've heard from the field is that it has been working for them to do them together. If this is like part of their AODA code violation, that it's still okay, like that there's not been like a conflict in services in that. And I don't know, that's like a really not technical answer, but that's like in the field how it's working out for us here. I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, it's a powerful in-school behavioral health support. Supports youth recovery, youth change, to have that SBRIT practitioner right in the school. And really, we could really look at a lot of different subgroups of kids who are currently in services, who could use the support in school, kids who really need specialist treatment, and that they're not going to respond real well to the brief intervention. And Tracy, our statewide evaluation data shows a solid 30%, 30 to 35% of students typically do not respond to brief intervention. So those kids are good candidates for a possible referral. And our statewide evaluation data shows that about 60 to 70% of kids respond beautifully to the brief intervention. And these are some of the kids who will never see the light of day in specialist behavioral health treatment. They don't meet the criteria for, that diagnostic level of a substance use disorder. But by participating in SBRIT in the school, it can really change the trajectory of the path that they might be on now. Tracy, talk a little bit about the kids who are kind of that subclinical but yet risky, how we've heard school practitioners value this practice to address those kids.
Right. Well, the screening tool gives them some more information to like assess that level of risk, I think. And like we don't define like who's eligible for this. We're going to talk about implementation here in a little bit, but we allow schools the flexibility to decide with what capacity they have in their school to try to find that like sweet spot for how to implement it within their school. And I think that takes a little bit of practice and probably a little bit too much of learning the hard way. Like, oh, I tried it with this student, especially when a practitioner's just learning it. It's like, maybe don't take on the most challenging student with the most complex behaviors. Maybe find one who is like a little bit more in the middle there, for at least for your first sake of learning, and then you can play around with this and see how it works as far as in your mental health referral pathways. So I think we haven't offered a whole lot of really, really good advice in selecting students. Schools have the flexibility to figure out how that best works with their internal systems in the school. And it's like a pro and a con for me. Like, I think schools like that flexibility, but yet then sometimes they want answers from us and we don't really have answers like, okay, here's the list of things that get referred to School SBRIT.
Yeah, we're touching on the how there.
Yeah.
And some of the comments and questions are kind of like, well, how does this actually look implemented into routine services? But Simon Sinek says start with the why.
Yeah, good transition, Scott. So we are going to ask about this why, and we're going to ask for your engagement in the why. We've already talked about the what. The how is coming, I promise. The rest of this session will be focused on that how that you came here for. But I do think in my work with my team this whole year, we have focused on like every decision we talk about a why, because it is important to establish as a whole it's a important starting point for any implementation project. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to put in the chat one reason why you would consider integrating SBRIT into your own services, or if you're a leader or administrator, one reason why you consider SBRIT delivered in your setting. So what is your why? We'll just give you a minute to either unmute and share your why or invite you to put it in the chat. Thank you, Mary. The importance of addressing ambivalence, so prevalent in adolescents. I have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old daughter at home. You do not need to talk to me about ambivalence. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, and there's some theme here, Tracy, in the chat of the developmental relevance of this teenage-friendly intervention approach. That's a good why.
Yeah, very good why. The brief intervention part of this, I can tell you that's probably the #1 sales pitch we use with schools is they're looking for brief interventions. They are tapped out for so many reasons that it really needs to be highly effective and brief.
And there are a couple of other comments in the chat about how SBRIT is really considered an opportunistic intervention, that you can get SBRIT into all kinds of different settings. So Kim was talking about the pediatric clinic. You can get it into schools. You can, a person was talking about juvenile justice. It can be in like a court juvenile justice setting as well. So it's like basically any opportunistic setting where teenagers show up and there are professionals who can briefly do some good work like this.
Catherine, I appreciate your comment about providing some structure to mental health intervention in a school, because I think you're right on. I have seen that like it sort of normalizes and provides a real tangible process for talking about mental health in school. Appreciate that. Scott, anything else you want to summarize from there? You're the master reflector. Give me something good.
Well, it just seems like, to summarize some of our whys here, it seems to work. So some of you are like, yeah, you can see how this model works with its developmental relevance, There's a structure that takes some of the burden off of practitioners, like, what do I do? What do I say? There's that structure. It's portable. So a couple of you are pointing out the portability of this. And I love some of you are like, it's the right thing to do to actually bring up behavioral health in various settings where teenagers are otherwise not being asked about how are you doing with mental health? How are you doing with substance use? So I love that, like, we can really kind of get after supporting change and recovery.
Thank you, Scott. We have put together some of our why and reasons, and it was sort of interesting for me to reflect on this for today's presentation, because we've been doing this for a while. Scott and I have delivered a presentation similar to this, and I can tell you that some of our whys have ebbed and flowed and shifted a little bit over the project. So Scott, if you want to go ahead, here are our reasons. Not that different from the things that you shared. School SBRIT is really evidence-based in the literature and research, as well as in our own practice-based evidence. I will share a little bit about our data collection system here in a minute, and we see a reduction in the frequency of problem behaviors amongst youth who receive the intervention in Wisconsin. Pupil service staff like a lot of the things you just said. It's student-centered, it's brief, they like the database screening tool. Once they get over some of the barriers of implementing it and feel more comfortable using it, they see how quickly they can get a lot of information and move forward with the student. It's a change in practice for a lot of educators. This is what we see in the training room. They're so used to fixing kids, solving problems, and so they like going back kind of to their social work or their school counseling roots, where they're supporting a student in a change process. And additionally, we do a little work with social emotional learning, and I just see the skills that students are gaining, the SEL skills. They're gaining a lot of goal setting and decision-making skills are really embedded in this whole practice for students. And we don't talk about that a whole lot, but it just becomes really clear. We align School SBRIT with the Wisconsin School Mental Health Framework. It fits into the continuum of supports that is offered in our Wisconsin framework, as well as it fits really well into the mental health referral pathways. I can't say this is ongoing work for most schools in Wisconsin. Their pathways are evolving and getting better as they put additional supports into place. But sometimes this is an entry point for schools into doing some additional mental health work, and that I consider a victory in the big picture of things also. SBRIT is really flexible. Schools have the options. They choose how referrals are made to and from School SBRIT. They choose when and how they implement. They choose who they get trained. So they have a lot of autonomy to use the intervention flexibly in their school. And we also work hard to make it really feasible for them. We have an application process early in September, and then we provide training in that first fall semester on how to use the protocol, how to practice all those OR skills. We provide practice where they audio record a practice session, and we provide a fidelity review where they get feedback on their practice. We provide ongoing implementation support the second semester and make it really feasible for them to implement it, highly accessible and as easy as possible for them to do it. Because we know the inside work of implementation is hard. It's not easy. And so if there's anything we can do to kind of enable that, we do all that we can. So those are some of my reasons. Scott, I invite you to add any of yours.
Well, it's such a comprehensive why. I have to say that for evidence-based practice implementation in Wisconsin in public schools, this has really been the cat's meow, if you will, of evidence-based practice implementation. And the reason why it is alive and well and a project, an implementation project that continues to thrive and attract funding is for these reasons. But let's turn attention back to some of you all are here and the wheels are turning because you want to go to your system partners or your partner you're working in one place and you've got partners in another place, or maybe you're going back to your setting and you want to go to your boss, your executive director, your administrator. How does this conversation here? We started with your why. We're adding our why. How does this help you? Start with the why as a part of a possible next right step coming out of this symposium. We'd love to hear anybody's thinking on that. And the reflective listening statement might be, you're not really sure, you're still pondering. Okay, we're going to come back to that. So in this next piece, we're about halfway here. We're at the halfway point in this session here. So we're going to spend the rest of our time, part 3, the how. So we got a great model. We have some why about the importance of actually getting this into practice. Now we're going to talk about the how. And there's 2 objectives. Recall from where we started 45 minutes ago. The first objective is we want you to be able to identify a couple of factors, implementation factors that have contributed to success in Wisconsin, in this Wisconsin school SBRIT implementation project. Okay. The second objective, though, folks, is for you to identify 1 or 2 next right steps for yourself, your services, your setting. It could be the why. It could be something else that gets sparked in this how. So we've got 4 sets of factors, A, B, C, D. And within some of these sets of factors of what we have experienced for implementation success in the Wisconsin project, there's probably about 12 to 15 factors. So of all these different factors that we're going to present, what are 1 or 2 that really get your attention? We're going to start with the team approach, because you can't get very far by yourself. You can be a champion, you can be a cheerleader. You're not going to get far in implementation without a team. And the good news is that if you're working in schools, then you're doing teaming on behalf of kids' behavioral health and recovery and positive change. Schools like teams. And turns out there's a lot of research supporting the effectiveness of teams. But now here's the thing. When we're talking about implementing an evidence-based practice like SBRIT, this isn't any old team. This is an implementation team that is charged with doing the work of implementation. The other thing the research shows is that having linked teams across various levels of the system are very useful. So where this whole project began 10 years ago was Tracy representing the WISH Center, myself representing the Department of Health Center, and then we had our public education agency in the state of Wisconsin. It's the Department of Public Instruction, and we had DPI staff at the table at the state level. We had a state team that was designing this initiative. That team is linked with Tracy's WISH team, dedicated time to process applications of schools applying to get into the project, selecting those schools, so doing the whole application process, providing that startup training, providing coaching, providing fidelity reviews and things like that. That's at the regional level. in a cohort-based learning approach. And then finally, there's the school team. That's the team that has the practitioners on it. It has the administrator on it. It might have the dean of students on, but that school-based team is the critical lever for the actual implementation project. All these teams are linked because the school teams cannot do the work in the building level without some support from the system level. So just a real quick little research glimpse into this literature of implementation teams. This comes from Fixon et al., kind of some of the original implementation scientists studying the factors that contribute to successful implementation. And what they showed was when your organization does not have a team in place trying to innovate, trying to get an evidence-based practice into routine practice with fidelity, you're going to be waiting a long time with questionable success. However, if you have a team in place designed to do the work of implementation, you can get it done in 2 to 4 years. So about 3 years on average with an 80% success rate. So it's a real strong case for how having a team makes a difference. Having a model makes a difference as well. I don't know about you all, but I did not go to school to understand how you implement an evidence-based practice. I went to school to learn evidence-based practice as a practitioner. I did not go to school to learn how does an organization actually implement this stuff. One of the big lessons learned in the school SBRIT implementation project is you better have a model to guide that ongoing process. So if we're talking 2 to 4 years, that is a long time process. And how are you going to guide it? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? Why are you doing what you're doing? And so in this model from the National Implementation Research Network, teams is a part of it. Okay, check. We understand the importance of teams. Okay, cool. What we're going to touch on right now is some of the drivers that we have had to figure out, that we've had to develop, resource, get into place, refine, and improve. And so let's take a look at drivers. Tracy's going to present on the organizational drivers, on kind of that right-hand side of the triangle. I'm going to present on the so-called competency drivers. These are the drivers that directly support practitioners to actually engage new ways of working with the screening, with the brief intervention, with the referral to treatment. And it starts with who you have in the project, staff selection. And so we ask as part of our statewide application to come into the project. We don't just take anybody. You have to apply. Part of that application is the school has to identify the practitioners who are ready, willing, and able, have the capacity to fully participate in this project. Now, these practitioners are self-selected. They are self-selected, but they have an understanding of what they're getting themselves into here. This is not a train and hope project. This is not go to the training and then nothing happens. This is a fair amount of involvement. Now, we think it's feasible, but you still have to show up with some involvement. So this staff selection immediately sets the project up for success because practitioners are coming in, they've got some readiness, they've got some willingness, they've got some ability to engage. And one of the very first things that we do is training. And as Tracy mentioned, this is a cohort-based training. We've got about 20 or so practitioners in a specific cohort representing 5 to 6 schools, thereabout. That's one cohort. It's a 2-day training. Day 1 introduces the model of SBRIT. So basically what we talked about, processes, engaging, focusing, evoking, planning, screening, brief intervention, use of the protocol, use of the tools. And we do a fair amount of skill practice and skill building. So it is a very involved experiential 1-day training. We send everybody home and then we come back about a month later for day 2, where people have done a little practice. And now we're going to dig more into skills. We're going to dig more into the protocol. We're going to do some more practice. And now we're going to start talking about referral to treatment. We're going to talk about how do you get this practice into your routine practice. We're going to talk about use of data, collecting data, using data, improving the implementation process. That all happens in day 2. But before day 1 ends, we have a fidelity assessment. And we have the dreaded recorders that come out at the end of day 1. And some of you all are starting to get sweaty just hearing about recording your practice for a fidelity review. Yeah, it gets everybody a little sweaty. And in this project, what we do is at the end of day 1 of training, we get everybody in pairs. One person's in a role play. The other person is the practitioner, delivers brief intervention on a specific change target. 10 minutes, recorded. The trainers collect those practice samples, take them back to their office, and then review, do a really good fidelity review. We use an instrument from the motivational interviewing folks. You can see the reference from Moyers below. We do a skill count. So we count skills, those core skills, we count them, we categorize them. And then we provide to each practitioner detailed individualized feedback. They get that when they show back up in day 2. And they love the feedback. So they're always nervous about the recording, but they love the feedback. And this fidelity review process here is usually one of the top rated aspects of the training. And what you're seeing here is the table of the skill measures that the fidelity review results in with fidelity benchmarks. Here are the standards. Yes, there are standards of fidelity. This is an evidence-based practice. And then that last column to the right is a study that was conducted kind of early on in our development of this project. And we looked systematically at 84 practitioners, practice samples, and these are the results across 5 trainings. And you can see how after 1 day, practitioners are able to show up on average with some real skillful practice. They can ask open questions to draw a change talk. They're following the protocol where all those questions are on. And then they're doing a nice job with some of the brief intervention adherent behaviors like affirmation, for example. And there's more work to be done. These skills, and especially the reflective listening, is a work in process. These are simple skills that are not easy to do well in practice. So this fidelity assessment really sets up coaching, the last competency driver. And coaching is what happens after training. And the research could not be more clear on this, folks, that coaching is an evidence-based method of fostering adult learning and professional development. And so in this project, we've had to be very feasible. We have limited resources. So the way we've developed the coaching driver, we've really kind of developed it over the years with trial and error. What we've really landed on is 3 90-minute group-based coaching sessions. So we gather the learners, the practitioners in that cohort. They come together virtually. And the focus of that group-based coaching session is on skill development. So we're going to keep on practicing reflective listening, for example. And we're going to take a look at implementation supports. We're going to take a look at your data. We're going to take a look at your progress. We're going to take a look at the barriers you're running into. We're going to problem solve those barriers within your team. So people are showing up to coaching sessions as a team. It's team-based coaching with emphasis on skill development and implementation supports. And what our evaluation, our statewide evaluation is showing is what we would call a robust attendance effect. Very simply, when practitioners attend, more students receive SBRIT. So this is what the data shows, that when practitioners attended 0 or 1 coaching session, hardly any students, not even 1 student received SBRIT from those practitioners on average. However, when practitioners attended 2 or 3 group-based coaching sessions, many more students received SBRIT. 2, to be a little bit more precise. 2 students across about 4 to 5 months. So it's still pretty minimal uptake, but it's a lot better than those folks who didn't show up or just attended one. And Tracy, what would you add to any of this before we get into the organizational drivers?
Yeah, two things to add to this. One, we just talked about our why, and this last slide was really important for my own team who are providing the services to understand the why it's important for us to provide that coaching implementation support, because I think it was like a little like, oh, we can do a little bit of this, but all of a sudden when we had that data to inform our practice, it's like this, what we're doing might not seem like much to you, but what we are doing is important to ensure that more kids receive these services. And number two, accountability. So this application process, and there's project requirements I'm going to talk about a little bit. And this is connected to the coaching also. Like, schools want that little bit of accountability. And it's really interesting to me how just that little bit of accountability, where they know they're going to have a coach checking in with them a few times, that there's going to be these small group coaching sessions, creates just a little bit of accountability where this doesn't get pushed to the back burner. It's like, oh yeah, Tracy and the team are going to meet with me again. I gotta do this. So it just is amazing to me how much the brief 3 meetings creates a little bit of accountability to schools to follow through with what they really want to do, and overcome some of those barriers. Thank you, Scott. I'm gonna move on to the organizational drivers to finish us up here. And I'm going to start with my favorite organizational driver, which is data systems. We have multiple data systems that we use for collecting information for this project. We have a school dashboard that I will go into in detail here in just a minute. We also have a project roster that we use in our team for kind of project management that tracks the application, the lead. There's a lead on each team, attendance for the trainings and all the coaching sessions. And then we have an end of the year summary survey that we administer to schools to collect some feedback from them. We use all this data to have a laser focus on how using it can improve implementation. And that's really the heart of this organizational driver. It's just not collecting the information, but it's like really, and not waiting until the end of the year, but setting up a system so that quarterly we can check in on the dashboards and our data collection and use it to implement change and use it in those coaching sessions that Scott just talked about. So the data dashboard is a spreadsheet that each school gets. It's a pretty simple Google slide that each year we update, customize, and each school gets their own individual sheet. And it collects implementation process measures, such as the percentage of staff implementing. It collects screening completion. It collects fidelity measures and some student outcomes. And it's an interactive spreadsheet. So there's tabs. The one you just saw was where the data entry happens on the spreadsheet, but then it populates data into other tabs that show a chart like this one. So at any point in the project, a school team can take a look at their data to see how the project's being implemented. This is an example from one school, and it really shows at this point in the project, 52% of the staff who were trained are delivering SBRIT with at least one student. This is pretty normal. This is something that we really call out in one of those first coaching sessions. Is the goal of this project is to have every staff member trained to implement, with at least one student per month. And if we did, we would see this exponential number of students who receive services.
And Tracy,
go ahead.
There's a little bit of a why here for this driver of data and a data system and data collection, because, hey, I'm a school social worker. I'm not a math. I didn't study math in school. I wasn't a math major in college. I like people, not numbers. So how do we sell this data collection and this use of data to improve implementation?
We make it easy, right? We make it, it could not be easier. They literally click on the tab and it's automated. to pre-populate all of those charts. So we created this to make it accessible and easy. So there's like no reason for not using it. There's no analysis needed on their part. It's right there, and if they enter the data, then they get the data back in some output that's usable for implementation planning. Also, other process measures here are, 97% of students have completed that initial screening, 80% completed the follow-up screening. There's a fidelity measure, a self-assessment tool that staff complete after each session, especially as they're learning this, that it's reported here. It reports the number of students referred for another service, as well as the number of students who entered into the referral. So a really good comprehensive tracking system, so a school can easily see, or a coach can easily see what's going on in that school, so they can have a conversation about any barriers or any next steps where they need to change the implementation plan. So each school individually receives their own dashboard. There's no identifying student information. They use initials for practitioners as well as students. There's a designated team lead on each team who is held a little bit more accountable for making sure this gets filled out. And each year we update it a little bit to make any tweaks that we have seen from the year before. And I create a training video that is distributed to the team, because what we found is they're not ready for it at training. Like, that's not the right time. They're worried about learning the practice, the protocol. They're not ready for data entry. So it works out really well to create this video. People can access it when they need to, and it can be used in a coaching session later. So try to do everything we can to support that data system. The next organizational driver is facilitative administration. And this is really kind of a fancy word for administrative support and problem solving. And I have to say, this is probably the driver we underestimated the most throughout our project. It's like we kind of knew it was important, and it needs to be more than a principal or administrator saying, hey, you pupil service team, go do this. Like, that's not enough. And we ask this question specifically in our application, and they're so hopeful. Every year, they're so hopeful, like the principal gave them permission to do this, that they can just run with it. And every year, we know that that's not enough. Like, this needs to be an engaging conversation. That administrator doesn't need to come through training, and they need to know exactly what this intervention is, why it's important, and how they can be an enabler in the implementation part of it. Scott, you got something to add? You look like you got the wheels turning up there.
No, it's just like these drivers, each one of them are absolutely essential to any successful implementation effort. And yet in the middle of the triangle, it says integrated and compensatory. So one of the things, Tracy, I think, is that we often have not had a very effective administrator on the team. And so that's where the data system and the coaching can kind of compensate for that a little bit, maybe not a lot. But schools have been able to pull off some meaningful implementation of SBRIT without that facilitative administration sometimes.
And it takes longer. It takes longer is exactly what we're learning. So like a school, exactly what you just said, it's possible. It just takes a little longer because they realize as they're implementing that first year what the barriers are, and then they have to go back and get that administrator on board, communicating, being more of an active contributor to the implementation plan. Go ahead to the next
because
slide.
those barriers are very real, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep, on the next slide. So last year we did an end of the year survey of those project leads from each team, and this is what we received back from them as far as barriers. This is very consistent for what we've seen for the life of this project. The top two are the lack of staff time, as well as competing demands of those school practitioners, trying to find the time to fit this into their busy schedules. And this just makes the case for how we really need that facilitative administration to just do more than give lip service to like, you can have the time. It's like creating some sort of system or structure where that time is protected. And there's all kinds of ways we've seen schools work on this, but just do not underestimate this particular driver, in my opinion. And then the final driver is really a systems intervention driver. And this is what has made our project so sustainable over the last 10 years. It's really taken a systems level team years to develop the project. Scott talked about this a little bit when he kicked off the how, but it's really having state team supports on multiple levels to help school teams implement. A couple activities that I would fit into here is, again, that alignment with the Wisconsin Comprehensive School Mental Health Framework. Our Department of Public Instruction includes School SBRIT as an evidence-based strategies in a lot of their funding opportunities. They encourage schools to use it. Schools come, they share with their neighboring districts how effective it is and how it's working. So it really has provided a lot of that systems level support that we have needed. It's really a powerful evidence-based practice that brings that vision of the Wisconsin School Mental Health Framework to life. And it's like this actionable, structured, pretty easy to use evidence-based practice that schools can use as part of that framework. Schools, just as a side note to this, schools come at varying levels. Some of them might not even know what the Wisconsin Comprehensive School Mental Health Framework is. They maybe have learned about School SBRIT through another route, and then it's like a good first exposure to say, hey, have you thought about that referral pathway? How can you set that up better? How can it be, you know, here are all the other parts that you can work with. But we take anybody. There is no like requirement, like you have to be at a certain level of implementation with that framework for you to come to our training. I talked a little bit at the beginning about our secure, sustainable funding. So we received $200,000 from our state budget. It's not a ton of money. It goes really fast, I can tell you that, but it is enough to sustain this regional support that we're able to provide to schools for 30 school districts. So that that supports the Wish Center team with some time dedicated for project management for me, as well as the trainers to provide the training, the fidelity review, and that coaching that we talked about. And it's the sustainable part of that that just really makes this a project that we can focus on continuous improvement, and there's not the stop and starts that I've had with other projects that we are funded by. So I'm so grateful for that, and it really, even though it's a small amount, it's a powerful amount. And I feel like we have a pretty good handle on kind of the boundaries and guardrails. We know we can't do any more than what we are than those 30 schools per year. Scott, go ahead. And finally, just a little bit about the stipend. So we provide a small stipend to schools for participation, $2,000 per year. And that's part of, I would say, like the marketing of being involved in the cohort, as well as the project requirements that come along with that. So these are all on our website, but schools know ahead of time prior to applying that they'll get the stipend if they meet project requirements, like attending the training, participating in the fidelity review, participating in the coaching sessions, submitting their data at the end of the year. And that small stipend just works so effectively. It is amazing to me that little bit of money creates accountability for a project lead, as well as for the team following through on those project requirements. And we see really like almost perfect attendance at trainings, as well as the coaching sessions. And it just is amazing to me, and it just is really working well, from my opinion.
It's kind of implementation on the cheap.
Yeah. Yep.
Which means if you do implementation on the cheap, it means you're just going to have to take more time. So where the average with that team in place is closer to 3 years, 2 to 4 years, 3 years on average. It took us closer to 5, 6 years to really find our groove in this statewide project. But we put into chat a few minutes ago an evaluation report that Tracy and I commissioned and led for the statewide project. And a lot of this with a lot more detail is covered in that report. But we're kind of curious. So the learning objective there was like, what gets your attention as like, wow, that seemed to be a really critical factor for some project success. Would love to hear in chat one factor of that how that really got your attention, or feel free to unmute. Yeah, even though it's on the cheap, the funding still matters. And I like how Tracy, as the director of this regional team, you have managed the budget like every dollar. You've made every dollar count.
No option, no other option, Scott. Make it happen.
What are some other factors that you all are seeing as your sense is like, wow, that really contributed to successful, practitioners in training, now actually implementing with kids. We have about 250 kids a year receive SBRIT in this statewide project. Yes, the team in place. Keep them coming, everybody. Keep them coming. Yeah, teamwork. What else?
I think having a model that's easy to follow too, with the right people in a teamwork effort for the collaboration.
That is such a profound insight, because you cannot implement something that's not clearly defined and operationalized. So good observation that when Tracy and I were describing the model, those components of practice, processes, core skills, it's all measurable and accessible in practice. And you have to have a model if you're going to implement something. Great insight. What else? The ongoing coaching. Yeah. With attention to that fidelity. Yes. Yes. Our belief is that one of the reasons why the evaluation data shows such great practice-based evidence of success is because we do emphasize fidelity and ongoing skill development, from the training to that ongoing coaching. What else do you all see? Factors contributing to implementation. You might want to be getting, you're kind of wanting to get to your potential project. And so that's the two-part question here, is like, what are some factors you see in this project that Tracy and I have been a part of? Now let's shift the focus to your potential implementation effort. Again, in your service as an individual practitioner, as a part of a team within your agency, or in partnership in a larger system, in a setting. And the key question, let's kind of bring it up on the slide here. The key question is, in chat, or feel free to unmute. What might be a next right step toward a potential SBRIT implementation project in your services or settings? We would love to hear. Feel free to unmute. Feel free to go to chat with that. What do you see, Tracy?
State level buy-in. And I think, I don't know if I unintentionally or intentionally forgot about this process of like when we were getting started, Scott, and how it was like a little bit of a plan, do, study, act, a little bit of a PDSA in those initial conversations with our state, where you had a lot of information on the evidence-based practice. I had some information on how we could roll it out statewide, and sort of we spent a year maybe having those conversations with our state Department of Public Instruction for them to invest and buy into that idea.
Yeah, we kind of did start with the why. with multiple system level partners.
Mhm.
Yeah, keep them coming, folks, either on mute or in chat. What might be a potential next right step? Coming out of this breakout session here, coming out of this symposium. So we don't certainly think School SBRIT corners the market on good practices. Maybe you heard something in the keynote in the last hour that kind of got you thinking about a next right step. So we can think really broad about it here.
Looks like some folks want to start talking with schools about their needs and coming at it that way, because we know schools have students with high mental health and substance use needs, and proposing this as a possible solution to get started with that referral process.
Oh, and leadership. Love the comment about, hey, we got to get leadership on board if anything is going to happen. Love that. What else, y'all?
I like to think about that as mental health literacy for administrators. I feel like we've been doing that for a while here. I don't know if there's a better technical term for it. That's my practical term of what I see every day in our work.
Wondering if we can offer a suggestion on a potential next right step. And this comes from the implementation model from the National Implementation Research Network. And I'm going to put a link in chat. And it's what they call a hexagon tool. And it is a tool designed for the exploration. So the why is a part of it, but there's some other things as well. And here's a visual of the hexagon. So hexagon implies 6. So you can see 6 domains or indicators that forming that team, getting a leader involved on the team, you can use this hexagon tool to really dig into 2 sets of indicators. So the first set in the green would be specific to the evidence-based practice. So it could be SBRIT, it could be any practice that you're considering for implementation, to just gather up information. What is the evidence of effectiveness with your population of focus? What is its usability? So the Wisconsin model, we have a very usable SBRIT model. We had to take a lot of time to develop that though, but that would be scored pretty high in this hexagon analysis for usability. And then what are the supports? What are the opportunities for training? What are the opportunities for technical assistance, for fidelity review, for coaching? Those competency drivers really require some supports. So that's the green side, the practice-specific indicator. And then you have the organizational side or the site-specific side. What is your need of your students, of your young people, of your youth, of your focus population? And how does that EBP fit? How does SBRIT fit with that need? How does the practice fit with your organization mission, your values, your provider's philosophies? SBRIT might not fit. You might like to tell kids what to do and have an education-focused intervention. Well, SBRIT's not going to fit if that's kind of your organizational thing. And then finally, capacity. We've had to really interrogate that at the state level, at the system level, capacity. Given limited funding, you get to do the same in your site, in your setting. So this hexagon tool is powerful for team-based exploration as you're getting started. And just in our last minute here before we wrap up, we're not making anything up here. And so we have lots of references and some resources in here to the model, the implementation model that we referenced, to the hexagon tool, to a couple of the reports that we referenced, to that fidelity tool that we use in this project. So lots of, and then the very last reference is to Tracy's website at the Wish Center, the School SBRIT School SBRIT implementation project. You can learn all about it at that website there. So thank you all so much. We are right at time. It's just been a great symposium here so far. Thank you for your interest. And Tracy, final word.
No, thank you all. I appreciate your time and attention, and I hope we gave you some tangible tools to get started.